If you've ever watched someone you trusted turn into a stranger right in front of you, you're going to want to hear this one. Stay until the end, and if you're new here, hit subscribe before we get into it. My name is Dalton Nelson. I was 36 years old, selling family homes in Brookhaven Ridge, Georgia, and at the time I thought a slow quarter was the biggest problem I had. It did not start with some obvious mistake or a clue dropped in my lap. It started with the way Stella looked at me, or stopped looking. There is a particular kind of silence that moves into a marriage before anything else does, and I am telling you, by February of that year, our house was full of it. Every room, every meal, every drive to anywhere. Stella had always been composed. That was one of the things I noticed first when we met. She carried herself like she had already thought through the room before she entered it. But composed and cold are two different things, and somewhere around the start of that year, she crossed the line between them and never came back. She started correcting me in front of people. Small things, the way I told a story, whether I had the date right, how I loaded the dishwasher. Her tone had this edge to it, like she had already decided I was not measuring up and was just waiting for me to notice. Her voice got cleaner and meaner. Every small mistake I made seemed to confirm something she had already concluded. She started getting dressed like she had somewhere important to be. Donor dinners for the art center, planning meetups with her friend Jenna, gym stops that took 2 hours when the gym was 12 minutes away. She wore things I had not seen in years, and her hair was always done. Her phone stayed face down on every surface in the house, the bathroom counter, the kitchen island, the nightstand. I noticed, of course I noticed, but every time I thought about asking, I already knew she would have an answer ready, and the answer would make me feel like the problem. While you're listening, share in the comments which country you're watching from, and let's continue. That is the part nobody tells you about the early stage. You do not suspect your spouse of cheating. You suspect yourself of being too sensitive. You start wondering if you are the cold one, the difficult one, the one who let things go sideways. You run the math on yourself before you run it on them. The contempt was the tell, not perfume, not a late night. Contempt. The way she smiled at her phone when she thought I was not watching, then let the smile drop the second she looked up and saw me. Like I was the thing interrupting her real life. I did not say anything, not yet. I just kept showing houses and writing contracts and coming home to a woman who made me feel like a stranger in a house with my name on the mortgage. A Thursday closing fell through around 2 in the afternoon. The buyers got cold feet, something about the inspection report, and suddenly my calendar was empty for the rest of the day. I drove home through the back way, pulled into the garage quietly, and let the door down behind me without slamming it. Not because I was sneaking. I was just tired and not in the mood for noise. I heard her before I reached the kitchen doorway. Stella was laughing. Not the polite laugh she used at dinner parties. Not the controlled smile she aimed at colleagues. This was the real one, loose and warm and completely unguarded. The kind of laugh I had not heard come out of her in months, maybe longer. She had her back to me. Phone flat on the counter, speaker on. The voice on the other end was low and even, and whatever he was saying, it was landing exactly right. Then she said it. He notices less than he thinks. I did not move. I stood in the hall between the kitchen and the laundry room, and I let those 6 words sit in my chest for a second. She was not talking about a coworker. She was not venting to a girlfriend. She was performing. For someone who mattered enough to perform for. She heard me come around the corner and the laughter cut off like a switch. She picked up the phone, switched off the speaker, and turned to face me with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "I didn't hear you pull in," she said. "I'm just on with Marin about the benefit schedule." Marin Holt was a real person. She sat on the art center board with Stella and had strong opinions about table arrangements. I had met her twice. I knew what her voice sounded like. The voice coming out of that speaker was not hers. I said something about the closing falling through and went to get water from the fridge. Stella went back to her call, walking out of the kitchen toward the back of the house, voice dropped low now, careful. I stood there with a glass of cold water and looked at the empty counter where her phone had been. No explanation, no name, just that one sentence she had not meant for me to hear. That was the night I stopped arguing with the story I had been telling myself. I stopped waiting for her to give me a reason to trust my instincts. I started treating my own marriage like a file I needed to work. I called Clyde Turner the next morning from my car, parked outside a coffee shop on Dunmore Avenue. Clyde and I had been friends since college, and for the last 12 years he had run a small investigative firm out of an office near the airport. He worked mostly corporate cases, insurance fraud, employee theft, that kind of thing. He was thorough and he was quiet, and those were exactly the two qualities I needed right now. I gave him the plate number off the black Range Rover that had been parked twice on our street in the last 3 weeks. Always gone before I came home, always there when Stella had somewhere to be. I had photographed it from the second-floor window without thinking too hard about why. Some part of me had already started collecting evidence before the rest of me was ready to admit it. Clyde called me back the following afternoon. The Range Rover was registered to a man named Wade Perry, 42, divorced, no kids. He ran a home staging company that worked the upper-tier real estate market, the kind of work where he would be in and out of listings regularly, setting up furniture and lighting to make empty rooms look like somebody's dream life. Clyde had GPS records showing the vehicle parked at 2 locations near Stella's usual routes, and he had receipts from a parking garage downtown, the same one, twice a week, for 6 weeks running. He also had photographs. I sat in my car and looked at them one by one on my phone. Stella in a gray coat getting out of a car. Stella walking next to a man I recognized. Standing close. The kind of close that does not happen by accident. The part that hit hardest was not the photographs themselves. It was where it had started. According to Clyde's timeline, their first contact was not at the art center benefit or some party I had not attended. It was at one of my open houses. A Tudor-style listing in North Brookhaven last October. I had worked that listing for 3 weeks. I remembered the weekend showing clearly. Stella had stopped by to bring me lunch and stayed to walk through with a few of the visitors. Wade Perry had been one of them. I closed Clyde's file on my phone, drove straight to a lawyer's office on Peachtree Road, and sat down with a woman named Claire Bassett, who specialized in contested divorces. I told her everything. She told me to stop using shared accounts for any new purchases, make copies of all financial documents, and say nothing at home that I was not willing to hear repeated back to me in a courtroom. That afternoon, I went home, made dinner, and acted like a man who had not just turned over every rock in his marriage and found what was living underneath. Tiana and Boone Crow lived about a mile from us in a craftsman-style house with a big backyard they used like a second living room from May through October. String lights over the patio, a gas fire pit, Adirondack chairs arranged in a loose circle, and always the right playlist playing at just the right volume. They were the kind of couple who made hosting look effortless, and their wine nights pulled together the same 12 or 15 people every few weeks. Stella spent almost an hour getting ready. She came downstairs in dark jeans and a silk blouse I had not seen before, hair down, jewelry I recognized from her good box. She stopped in the doorway to the kitchen and asked me if she looked okay. She was not asking for my opinion. She was making sure her face said exactly what she wanted it to say before we left. I told her she looked fine. She nodded once and picked up her wine glass from the counter. We drove over together without saying much. Boone met us at the side gate, handed me a bourbon, and immediately pulled me into a conversation about the Falcons, which was exactly what I needed. I stayed loose. I laughed at the right moments. I kept my shoulders down and my mouth easy, the way you do when you are holding something heavy and you do not want anyone to know the weight of it. Wade Perry arrived about 40 minutes in. I saw him come through the gate before Stella did. He was dressed well, casual but intentional, the kind of outfit that says, "I did not try too hard," while making it obvious that he absolutely did. He shook Boone's hand, said something that made Tiana laugh, and then he crossed the patio toward the rest of the group. When he reached me, he put out his hand and smiled like a man with nothing to hide. "Dalton, good to see you. I think we crossed paths on that Tudor listing last fall, didn't we?" I shook his hand. "That's right," I said. "The Henderson's place, I remember." His grip was steady. I gave him the same. For the next hour, I watched him. He was good at it. The distance he kept from Stella, the way he spread his attention evenly across the group so nobody would clock the pattern. But I had been watching for weeks. I knew what I was looking at. Every time he shifted toward her side of the fire, she found a reason to stay near him without making it look deliberate. A laugh in his direction, a comment across the circle. The geometry of it was tight and practiced. Then Stella moved next to Boone and started steering him toward the subject of marriage, how long he and Tiana had made it work, what the secret was. Boone loved that kind of question. He would talk about it for 20 minutes without prompting. Stella knew that. She was setting up a topic that would keep the conversation on relationships, somewhere she could make a point in public without it looking like an attack. I sipped my bourbon and waited to see where she planned to land it. Boone held court for a while the way he always did. Slow and sincere, something about showing up even when it was inconvenient. Something about choosing someone again every day. The fire was low and the lights were warm, and everyone around that circle was relaxed and a little soft from the wine, and it was exactly the moment Stella had been waiting for. Boone finished and looked around the group. "What about you two? Dalton, Stella, you've got, what, 9 years now?" Stella leaned back in her chair like a woman who had already decided what she was going to say and had just been waiting for the cue. 9 years, she said. And I'll be honest with you all. I think I stopped loving Dalton a long time ago. He is safe, and he is predictable, and for a while that felt like enough. But safe doesn't keep you. I think we all know that. She said it with the measured calm of someone who had practiced it, like honesty dressed up to look like courage. 12 people went quiet. The fire crackled. Someone put their wine glass down. I let the silence sit for about 3 full seconds. Then I said, "That's not honesty, Stella. That's a cover story." She looked at me like she was deciding whether I had the nerve to keep going. I kept going. "Her name wasn't Marin on that call," I said. "It was Wade. The Range Rover in our neighborhood belongs to Wade. They've been meeting downtown twice a week for at least 6 weeks, and the first time they met was at my open house on Collier Road last October. I was there. I sold the listing. I just didn't know what else I was selling." The circle went completely still. Stella's face dropped the composure it had been wearing all evening. Wade, across the fire, went very quiet and very calm, which was its own kind of answer. He did not deny it, did not look confused, did not ask what I was talking about. He just looked at the ground and said, carefully, that this was not the place for it. "You picked the place," I said. "She picked the audience. I'm just the one being honest." Tiana's hand was over her mouth. Boone had stopped smiling. Every face around that fire had shifted away from Stella and toward the empty space between us where the truth had just landed. I set my glass down on the arm of the chair, stood up, and looked at Stella one last time. I picked up my jacket off the back of the chair and walked across the patio to where Boone was standing. I thanked him for having us. He grabbed my arm for a second, didn't say anything, just nodded. That was enough. On the way out, I passed close enough to Stella to speak quietly without the group hearing. "Claire Bassett's office called this week," I said. "I've already retained her. You might want to call someone." I walked through the side gate and out to the street without looking back. I did not want to give her a reaction to work with. Stella was good at finding leverage in emotion, and I was done giving her raw material. Clyde lived about 20 minutes away in a condo near Decatur. I had texted him from the car before I pulled out of the Crow's neighborhood, and by the time I got there, he had the door open and a bottle of Knob Creek on the kitchen counter. We went out on the balcony, sat in the cold, and he poured 2 glasses without making a thing of it. I sat there for a while without saying much. Not grieving exactly, something looser than that. There is a specific kind of relief that comes from the moment a long pretense finally ends. Not happiness, just the absence of the weight you did not realize you had been carrying. 2 days later, Jenna called me. She sounded rattled. She said Stella had been using the donor planning meetings and the art center prep sessions as cover for months, telling her the schedule, giving her enough detail to repeat if anyone asked. Jenna had not known what it was covering. She sounded like a woman who had just realized Stella had been using her name to cover months of lies. The divorce moved faster than I expected. Claire was organized and unemotional, which was exactly what I needed in a lawyer. My financial records were clean and consistent. Stella's timeline had gaps in it that no amount of reframing could fill. None of the mutual friends who knew the full picture were willing to back her version when it mattered. Stella never came to me asking for a second chance. She spent the weeks after the Crow's party working the phones, managing the story, getting ahead of what people thought they knew, deciding who found out what and in what order. She was still trying to control the narrative, just for a smaller and more skeptical audience. The papers were signed before Thanksgiving. Once the whole thing came out in the open, really out, not just whispered about at dinner parties, Wade Perry stopped looking like someone who had swept in and won something. He looked like what he was, a man in his 40s who had gotten involved with a married woman and was now the permanent explanation for why her marriage ended. That is a different kind of story to carry around. I know because I watched him carry it, He started pulling back from the social circle, fewer appearances at the events he used to work. Tiana mentioned, about 6 weeks after the Crows night, that he had stopped returning calls from 2 of the women in the group who used his staging company. A month after that, Boone told me, flatly and without much commentary, that Wade had mentioned hating the way people looked at him now. Hating being the guy. I didn't say anything when Boone told me that. I just nodded and let it sit there. Stella tried a version of the narrative where she had been quietly suffering for years and had finally found the courage to be honest. She used words like authentic and clarity and growth. A few people who didn't know the full timeline bought it for a while. But Jenna, who knew every calendar date and every false alibi, quietly told the truth when it mattered. And Tiana, who had heard Stella deliver that speech at her own fire pit, was not interested in helping her rewrite it. The social rewrite stalled. Not dramatically, no confrontation, no public reckoning, just a slow cooling. The invitations came less often. The close circle that had once included both of us began sorting itself, the way these things always do, along lines of who had actually been honest and who had not. I closed on a Lakeview colonial out in Crestwood in November. 3 bedrooms, a big back porch, and a view of the water that turned orange in the late afternoon. I moved in with a truckload of furniture and no particular plan for what came next, and that felt exactly right. The first night I slept in that house, I slept straight through until 7 in the morning. No waking up in the middle of the night with the low-grade anxiety that had been running under everything for the better part of a year. No listening to the silence in a bedroom that used to feel easy and had stopped. Just sleep. I made coffee the next morning and stood on the back porch in the cold and looked at the water. I thought about the open house on Collier Road where all of it had apparently begun, the Tudor listing, the couple that bought it, the visitors who had walked through, Stella bringing me lunch and staying longer than she needed to. I had worked that listing hard. I had been proud of the close. Looking back, I could trace the whole thing to a single afternoon I had considered a good day at work. What I learned, and I mean really learned, not just told myself, was that the marriage had not been taken from me. It had been rotting from the inside for longer than I had let myself see, and Stella had made a decision about that before she ever told me there was a problem. She had chosen replacement over conversation, escape over honesty, and she had used my trust, my open house, and Jenna's planning meetings to build the runway. I was not angry about it anymore, not in the hot way anyway. The cold clarity that had replaced it was harder and more permanent, and I found it more useful. I listed a lakeside property the following week, sold it inside of 10 days, and took myself to dinner at a place in Decatur I had always wanted to try. Sat at the bar, ordered something good, talked to nobody, and felt steady for the first time in a long while. The house on the water was mine. The work was mine. The decisions from here were mine. That was the whole ending right there. Was Dalton right to expose Wade and Stella publicly, or should he have handled it differently? Leave your answer in the comments. And if this story hit home, push hype button, like it, and subscribe. It helps more than you know.